You're live.
Oh, good evening and welcome to the second public engagement meeting for the Peacock Senior Park Development. Tonight I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. So everyone's microphones will be muted throughout the duration of the presentation. We would ask that you utilize the Q&A feature to ask questions, and all questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. A copy of the presentation will be made available on the website after the meeting. So if you know of individuals who may have wanted to watch but weren't available tonight, please let them know to visit the website for that presentation. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis to get us started. And again, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, just type those into that Q&A box.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening. My name is Dennis Murphy. I'm with the firm of Culpeper Interpreting here up in Fort Pierce. And we are pleased to be working with the City of Port St. Lucie in this final presentation of the Conceptual Master Plan for the OL Peacock Park in Western Port St. Lucie. What we're going to do tonight, real quickly, just kind of a brief overview, is that we're going to walk through a summation of the first meeting we had several months ago, and we're going to present to you the graphic options for how the master plan for the park could be developed. We will close out our discussion with some scheduling and budgeting estimates, and then I believe we're going to be opening it up for questions and answers through the internet for anyone who wants more additional details. And as Kelly said, this PowerPoint will be posted on the website following the meeting over the next couple of days. So if anyone wants to get additional details or get a better look at some of the graphics, that information will be present there. With that, we shall advance. Again, this kind of introduced the team on this. The city team members are, of course, Kelly Boatwright, who is your project manager, and then also to my right is Bolivar Gomez, who will be handling your Q&A session tonight. Bradley Keene is the Parks and Rec Director, Assistant Director. He could not be with us tonight, but we will push on without him. He's very good at what he does, and something else came up. In making this presentation, helping put this together, of course, Culpeper Interpreting, who I represent, we provide civil services, civil engineering services. Lucido and Associates provided landscape architectural services, and the city's Parks and Recreation Coordinator, Dr. David Barth, provided master planning assistance in the project. All right, the objective of tonight's meeting, as I already stated, is to come back in, review the comments and issues that were presented during the September meeting, and show you how it all turned into a concept plan that we think will come in and address and be an asset for the community. By way of background, talk about where we're talking about. As most of you know, the OL Peacock Park is located in Western Port St. Lucie, adjacent to I-95. It's a little bit west of Rosser Boulevard along Dreyfus Boulevard, south of Gatlin Boulevard. The site is 165 acres. Don't let that get you excited, because 102 of that is water. It is an old borrow pit that was used to develop much of Port St. Lucie in the 1990s and early 2000s, and it was closed out in the latter 2000s. There are about 16 acres of wetlands existing on the property, and there's 47 acres of upland. But again, looks can be deceiving. Of that 47 acres, and this is what makes this site a challenge, only about 15 of it are considered to be net usable acreage. So, back in September, we held a community workshop, similar format, where we asked all of our participants a series of questions about what they would want to see in this particular property. Survey comments were collected via online submission from September 2021 through October 13th, 2021. And the objective of that effort was to give us, the city, guidance on how we should be looking to program the various improvements at this facility. The tables you see in front of you is a summation of the various comments that we received, and there were two broad categories of questions asked. What activities would you like to see at the park, and what amenities would you like to see at the park? They're similar, but they are different. Activities are things that you go out and physically partake into. Amenities are the physical improvements that allow the activities to take place. And when you look at the listings and the identification of the comments, you'll see that there is generally a consistent comment about having a park that provided walking and exercising and biking opportunities, areas for simple gatherings, community gatherings, neighborhood gatherings, family gatherings, kayaking and canoeing on the lake. The lake is a lake that does permit non-motorized watercraft to access it, and it is one that is seen as a general enhancement for the area. The other items in through here, again, they're pretty general for this type of park facility. So taking these comments, we went back to the drawing boards, and we came back with some development plans that essentially look like this. Now, this is a very wide-angle view of the property, but it generally comes in and shows that we are preserving the wetlands on the site, as we had indicated was going to occur in the past. We've identified areas of what would be a neighborhood pavilion or a community pavilion use area up along the largely developable area of the property. We provided for a boat launch area where you can launch non-motorized boats and kayaks. And most importantly, we've identified what we think is probably going to be the premier element in this park, in that it provides an opportunity for a 2.25 mile biking and hiking trail within the urban area of the city, in an environment that is probably not replicated anywhere else in the city, as you have natural environment adjacent to an open lake in an area otherwise surrounded by homes and businesses. Now, we're going to have detailed blow-ups of the various areas, starting with the area in the northeast corner of the project. This is a current aerial view of the main development or the main activity area that'll be found on the Peacock Property Park. This is looking from the east to the northwest, and that white building you see in the background is the Cleveland Clinic Hospital. As you can see, the current condition of the property is essentially vacant. There is a relatively large earthen berm that runs alongside Dreyfus Boulevard that has a number of mature oak trees growing into it. This is the area that will be the foundation for the development of the use activities taking place within the park. We've divided the area along the north end of the property here into two general planning groups, one that we call the east area and one that we call the west area. The east area is essentially that portion of the property from our east property line over to where our land masses, when you look at the site, end. This is the, as I said previously, the most developable portion of the property, and it is the one that we're probably going to start with as we advance forward in activities. This is the concept plan for the east area. Provides for a community pavilion, it provides for playground areas, it provides for exercise areas, it provides for water overlook areas, it provides for seating and walking areas throughout there, plus it provides for just general open space. Now, one thing that you will see, if you go back an image here, you'll notice that there is a large unimproved, and I'm not getting my laser, there it is. There's a large parking area that sits right here. When we advance back, you'll notice that there is no parking on the property. That is probably one of the most significant design elements that we've had to address with this facility. This plan proposes to take the existing milling parking areas that are inside the park and taking up valuable space in a limited development area and move them to the perimeter of the property. This plan proposes that we will construct a series of on-street parking areas, parallel parking areas along Dreyfus Boulevard that will serve as the primary parking for those residents who cannot walk or otherwise bike to this facility. The highlighted red circles show the first areas of on-street parking. The center circle indicates where the driveway, currently existing, will be removed, and a small entry area will be proposed for landscaping improvements and construction. As we advance forward through the initial stages of development, we will have a center core of the park area where we'll have a community pavilion area which can be available for use by community groups or lease or rent for family activities. And then off to the left and to the right, we will have a child's play area on the right side with restrooms. And over on the left, there will be a future athletic sports court area. The athletic and sports court area would be integrated into the regional trail around the lake as it is developed and when it is developed. The multi-use open areas will be available for any kind of special events that the neighborhood or the city may wish to host out here. And then the other opportunity areas are just for quiet reflection along the shoreline edge there. The overlook will be constructed in the latter stages of the project and as we advance with the trail systems. So this is the clean version of the East Area Development Master Plan. Now, there's the second part of this is the West Area. And the West Area presents a few more challenges than the East Area did. Most specifically, if you can see from this aerial, the narrow width of the available land in this area. It also presents some challenges in this area, is that those of you who live on a lake here in the city, and if you live on the north side of the lake, of your stormwater lake, you've probably noticed that over time, you are subject to erosion along your shoreline. And that is what has occurred here. As I said, we have a 102-acre lake. It is a roughly three-quarters of a mile fetch over open water, and that with the prevailing southeasterly winds that this area receives, that over time causes soil erosion to take place. And that's where you see these various escarpments alongside the bank and through here. This is the area that we will, over time, be reestablishing the shoreline, regrading the shoreline out, and then we will also, through this area, be providing for a non-motorized boat ramp facility, a kayak launch facility, and we will be constructing some small fishing piers for folks who wish to come out and partake in the fishing. You will also note that along there will be additional on-street parking added in this area. And as I mentioned a moment ago, the ramps will be installed in these particular parts of the world. Now that takes us across the northern portion of the property. That is the most heavily used and currently is likely to be the most heavily used as the project develops in the future. However, as I said earlier, what I consider to be the gem of this property is the perimeter trail. I was touch on this. The perimeter trails that go around the lake. And those are going to be the latter stages of development. And those, as we previously addressed, would come back in and provide for a paved trail system that can be used for biking or walking or hiking, and would have rest areas along the perimeters. And it would be open for the general public to just come out and enjoy. Periodically along the corridor, you will see that there are, this takes a little bit of an artwork to do there. Periodically along the corridor, you'll see some overlooks where people can come out, little piers coming out into the lake. We proposed a small bridge over another portion of the site, and I just cannot do this. I apologize. We have a small bridge that would come across there if someone didn't want to walk the full perimeter of the path. And then there's also some neighborhood access points that could be made available as the project develops. This is the current condition of the trail system along the north end of the property. This is generally how it exists as you go around the perimeter of the property. It's about a 12-foot wide path. We would not be paving an entire, we would not propose to be paving an entire 12-foot wide path, but it would be of sufficient width to allow for bicycles to pass in each direction. Now, once we get from the concepts of the art of a master plan, where we begin to identify and we get away from the what ifs and the pictures are put together, the next critical phase that we enter into is called program scheduling. Program scheduling is where we begin to identify when we expect things to be built and how we expect to pay for them. This particular project has from the outset been visioned as a multi-phased, multi-year project. It is one that, because of the special characteristics, it will have to be developed incrementally in order to make most effective use of available resources. We are proposing that we start that multi-phased approach in the northeast corner of the project. Northeast corner of the project is this area as shown right here. And we've divided this up into 3 phases, and we've assigned some preliminary, and I emphasize on the word preliminary, budget estimates for what we think it's going to cost to come in and do this. You'll notice that phase 1 has a rather substantial price tag associated with it, $1.7 million to come in and to do an awful lot of work. The initial work would involve the construction of the parallel parking spaces along Dreyfus Boulevard. That's in the red circles you see along the north end of the property. It would involve removing the existing milling surfaces and replacing it with the community building or the community pavilion, some common garden areas, some common landscaping areas, and enhancing the entry coming in off of Dreyfus Boulevard. Second phase would be the development of the child tot lot area and the restroom facilities, which are on the right-hand side of the drawing. Third phase would involve the installation and construction of the athletic sports court area and coordination and preliminary setup for integration into the lake trail when that is built in a latter stage of the project. The third phase at this time also would include the extension of the lake overlook coming off the community pavilion from the first phase of the project. All told, you're talking about a little shy of a little over $3 million to come in and do this in today's money. As we refine project construction designs, these numbers can change. They can go up and they can go down, but it is our objective to maximize the available funds that are available. Sorry for redundancy there. Maximize the available funds to get as much of an improvement in as we possibly can. It is also the objective of the city, and it's carried out on most all of their community improvement projects, that we will use any local monies as leverage for state and grant monies that we can use to stretch out where we're going to. Second part of the project, the east side of the development, we are showing that right now, our preliminary estimates are that it's going to be about $750,000 to come in and restore, stabilize, replant, and vegetate that northern shoreline. That would involve grading, bringing in filled material to extend and reestablish the banks of the shore, replant the vegetation that's in the lake, and get it up into a position where we can come in and commence construction of the boat ramp facilities, as well as the additional parking along Dreyfus Boulevard. When we're all said and done, the parking along Dreyfus Boulevard will be approximately 30 to 40 vehicles. There will be ADA access for all vehicles along that entire corridor. And again, when I say that, it includes both the east and the west areas as well. And that should be enough to handle most activities within the park itself. Then we go to the trail and to the piers. Now, these are going to be expensive construction items. There's no question about that. But these are the these are the projects that create the destination value for the particular park. And current estimates are somewhere in the area between $3 and $3.5 million to come in and construct 2.25 miles of trail, plus associated bridging and docking systems. As I said, all of this will be dealt with in finer detail once we move into construction plans. So, going back to that, we have questions. Let me go back to just one element that we're talking about moving through here. At the present time, there is no specific budget year schedule for these activities. The city is currently working on its fiscal 22-23 budget, which is the next year's budget, and that will include for some of the initial design and some of the initial construction work for the first phase of improvements, so that as the next several years carry through, we will hopefully get in a position to have a substantial portion of the eastern area completed. That is a quick summary of the park master planning. I'm going to go back to, do you want me to go to this one, or do you want me to go to a detail sheet?
I think if you went, let's go to the one that shows most of those improvements.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's probably, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Start there.
Right. So we'll open it up to any questions that viewers may have as to what we're showing, why we're showing it, what we didn't show, or whatever, or any other suggestion. We consider this to be essentially a 60% complete master plan in terms of ideas, but if there's any additional programming or ideas, we're always open to entertaining them.
All right, well, thank you, Dennis, and good evening, everyone. Again, Bolivar Gomez here on behalf of Neighborhood Services Department. At this time, I do have one question in the chat box that I'll go ahead and read off. Dennis, if you could speak on the parking spots, how many parking spots will be along the road there, would you imagine?
The parallel parking sections, let me go back to a different drawing here for a second. Bear with me here for a moment. Oops. Parallel parking would be located alongside Dreyfus Boulevard in here and working its way down this way. As I said a few moments ago, when you look at the entirety of the park frontage on Dreyfus Boulevard, we have room for about 30 to 40 spaces, depending upon the number of landscaping islands and other features we put in there. Parallel parking spaces are typically 22 feet long, 8 feet wide. A few years ago, the city came in and along Crosstown Parkway developed a couple of exercise and walking trail stations just to the east of Bayshore Boulevard. And Culpeper Interpreting was asked to come in and evaluate the best parking methods for folks who were going to go and use those facilities. And we concluded that in that particular location, a parallel parking system appeared to be the best treatment for that. That same set of conditions appears to exist along Dreyfus, and the parallel parking modifications would be integrated into the roadway. The actual number of spaces on any one string, as I said, will depend upon what supplemental street landscaping goes in to create that sense of neighborhood and that sense of place that all good site designers try to achieve. And as I said earlier, everything is ADA accessible and it will meet all city and applicable federal codes for access. Hopefully that answered or provided some guidance to the question.
Yes, thank you so much, Dennis. Another question that we actually just received in the chat box comes from Gina, and she asks, oh, I'm so sorry, the gentleman's name is actually Richard. Will the exotic and nuisance plants along the west side be removed?
Yes, normally, as part of any kind of permitting through any state or local agency, a standard condition of approval is that exotic vegetation that's found in your development activity area is to be removed. Now, the methods and the timing of the removal are usually worked out during construction permitting and construction design stages. So I can say that, yes, if there's exotics that are in the areas of construction, they will be removed. I know that recently, I believe the city received some grant funding to remove the exotics along the east side of the lake from Fish and Wildlife Service. And I would expect those same cleaning activities, if you will take place as we move around the rest of the lake.
Okay, great.
And I would just offer, actually, that those activities have been going on site recently, and you may have noticed that they have been out cleaning out the Brazilian peppers on that east side just recently. That project with FWC was planned as a part of them enhancing the fish habitat in the area. So if you've noticed some of that activity, that would be part of that.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Another question that we received in the chat box is, what is the timing for completion of the project?
You want to start with that one?
Yeah, I'll start that one out, only because we are actually in our budget cycle right now, and as Dennis mentioned, the funding mechanisms have not been determined for all phases of the project. Neighborhood Services does have some funding budgeted for this next fiscal year. I believe that you're going to roll over, correct? And so we'll be able to do part of a phase one. We are working to determine exactly which amenities that's going to include now, and actually anticipate bringing that to council, the special city council meeting on March 21st, if I'm not mistaken, right, Boulevard?
Yes, that is correct. So the conceptual plan, once we move past the final development of the conceptual plan, then we will look to implement phase one. As Dennis had recently shown, there are several improvements that will be looked at for phase one, but with the funding that we do have available, we'll go ahead and see what can be done with the initial go-to with the project starting off.
I think there's one thing to add to this is that, and I say this as a resident of the city as well as a consultant for the city, is that if the community feels that there is value and merit into a project and you want to see it done in as expedited a manner as possible, understanding the realities of fiscal resources, simply keep your council members aware that you want to see this happen and that they can then help to make it happen.
Great, that's a great response, Dennis, and that actually kind of plays into the, a question/comment that we also received, which asked if the park will still be accessible while some of these improvements are being made.
Construction phasing plans have not been developed, obviously, at this stage of the game, and I know from prior experience on similar type projects that every effort is made to keep public facilities open as much as possible during construction. There are, of course, safety issues that have to be considered, but as much as possible, the parks will be kept open.
Great, and I believe you touched on this at the very beginning also with regards to a fishing pier, and if that's a possibility at this site. Is that something that you can also maybe expand a little bit on for this location?
Yeah, let me advance to another screen here. I'll take this one here. If you look, this is the west area of the park alongside Dreyfus Boulevard. It's the area that the boat ramps are proposed for location onto it. And if you look at the middle of the drawing, right about, oops, yeah. Right. I want to know the engineering genius who came up with how to make this thing work. If you look in the middle of the drawing, you'll see that there is an overlook fishing pier. The master plan calls for a number of those piers scattered to go around the ring of the lake at various locations and various points without the corridor. Timing for when they're to be constructed has not yet been identified, but that's representative of where they would be. What we would be trying to do with these piers is to, and particularly in this area, is to minimize the bank fishing that takes place. Because if you have people who are making use of the trail proposed in this area, you don't necessarily want them to be in conflict with folks who are out there fishing. Now, part of that gets solved by the shoreline restoration work, where and today there may be some erosion and water conditions, but if you add and reconstruct the shoreline, then you can get some additional bank fishing to take place, or opportunity for bank fishing to take place. So hopefully that addressed that question.
All right, thank you. And I only have one last question in the chat box. So again, if you do have any additional questions, you can go ahead and certainly utilize the question and answer box. Excuse me. So with the last question that I have is, will the fencing along the northwest portion of the park be improved to prevent ATVs from accessing the park?
We have not, through this master planning effort, identified perimeter fencing or screening or security requirements. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It just means at this stage of the master plan, that has not been fully looked into. It's a very valid question, and clearly, the wetland areas are typically required to be screened so that ATVs and other vehicles that can cause damage to them are not allowed into them. That is an item that I can assure you will be addressed in greater detail as final construction plans are prepared for the site.
All right, thank you, Dennis. I don't see any other questions at this time. If we can probably put the slide up that shows our email addresses here. If there's any additional questions following today's meeting, you could certainly email myself, again, Bolivar Gomez, or Kelly Boatwright, who's, again, our Parks and Rec staff member here this evening. And there it is right there.
Right by it, sorry.
And we will certainly go ahead and respond via email at that point in time as well.
And again, I would reiterate that if you would like to view this presentation later, or if you know anyone whom you think would benefit from watching the presentation, you can find that on the website, www.cityofpsl.com/parks. And then you would just look for the OL Peacock Park underneath all of that listing.
And I will add one more thing to the one more thing, if I can, please. As we said earlier, we will make sure that in addition to the overall slide presentation that's presented there, we will have accessible graphics for folks PDF graphics to download and zoom into, where you can get a better idea and a better handle on the visual aspects of the master plan facilities. I think then if there's no one else who has any further questions or comments, thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate your interest and your concern, and I will pass it back over to Kelly to take us out.
As Dennis mentioned, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you at any further public engagement. Lots going on in parks and recreation and in the city as a whole. A lot of growth and a lot of development, so we look forward to seeing you in the future at our public engagement sessions. Thank you so much and have a great night.